We are so grateful to have been invited to be here. This is our hometown and where our journey with anorexia nervosa began. The last 3 years have been the most challenging our family have ever endured, but along with the challenges, we have found many gifts. We believe that one of these is some understanding that we can share with others in order to help in their journeys. We are not experts, just people with experience in what we believe is the most misunderstood of all mental illnesses. We have been fortunate to become involved with the Child and Youth Mental Health and Substance Use Collaborative Project as members of the South Okanagan Similkameen Action Team and supported through Force Society for Kids' Mental Health. This experience has given us a broader view of the mental health system province-wide from the perspectives of professionals, parents, and youth, and it has enhanced our understanding of the common needs we share with so many communities throughout BC.
I would like to thank everyone for having us here today to be a part of something so groundbreaking. Having the opportunity to contribute to initiatives like this allows me to accept my eating disorder as a gift rather than a burden. However, I have not always felt this way. Just over 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, a disease which would not only threaten my life, but change it completely. When I consider the past 3 years, I like to segment time into 3 periods: pre-inpatient, inpatient, and post-inpatient. I consider most of my adolescence to be included in pre-inpatient, as I experienced situations and events which would eventually contribute to the onset of an eating disorder. Low self-esteem, body image issues, bullying, and both internal and external pressures contributed to an eventual state of self-loathing. Coupled with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, I became susceptible to anorexia. I don't claim to be an expert of any kind, but I have researched eating disorders extensively and have come to learn that they are not a choice. In fact, they're hereditary, and most often lie dormant until triggered by high levels of stress, either emotional and/or physical. In my case, these factors manifested as I became exercise-obsessed and restrictive in my diet. At the time, I perceived these behaviors as steps toward liking myself more, but I realize now that they were attempts to find control at a time when I felt I had little. As my weight declined, so did my mental health. My family's concern grew steadily until my mom took me to an eating disorder nurse, doctor, and mental health clinician. At this point, I had no diagnosis. General physical monitoring took place as the disease rapidly infiltrated my mind. We waited months to see a psychiatrist for a 1.5-hour appointment with no follow-up. I was eventually diagnosed, although professionals who were caring for me apologized for the absence of a professional or program in our area that specialized in eating disorders. Despite my parents' urgency in getting me any help available, I was now fully under the control of Ed, who made me want to remain sick. I learned to call him this in order to separate the disease from myself, which was extremely effective in recovery. Ed's influence had me avoiding appointments and resenting the fact that they were most often during school hours. To me, treatment was taking back the control which I had so painstakingly collected through my intense food restriction and extreme exercise regimen. I was like a suicidal robot, fluctuating between finding relief in the control that Ed offered me and yearning for an escape. My parents and my team persisted in doing all that they could to help me, but I continued to get sicker. Eventually, my heart rate was so dangerously low that I was forcibly admitted into BC Children's. The inpatient period saved my body through refeeding and rest from the excessive exercise with which I abused it with daily. As my mind healed physically, I was able to function cognitively. It was during this time that I began to have flickers of motivation to recover. At some point in the inpatient period, my family made the bold decision to uproot and move to Penticton. There were various reasons behind the move, but a chief motivator was the eating disorder program in Kelowna. Upon discharge, I was conflicted. Some days I reveled in my mental clarity or the fact that my hair was shiny again, or the fact that I could have a bath without pain from my bones digging into my skin. Others, I despised the weight which I had gained, and I swore to lose it 10 times as fast as it had been gained. During this post-inpatient period, the greatest factor in my recovery was my family's and team's ability to keep me on the recovery wagon. They were advised while I was in the hospital that post-refeeding would be the most difficult part of recovery. With the use of the eating disorder care education, which was provided by BC Children's, they persisted in caring for me every minute of every day. This meant making sure I was following the strict meal plan, but also offering endless love, understanding, and encouragement. Ultimately, it was my family's unconditional love which saved me, and then helped me towards recovery.
Early in Riley's illness, we were fortunate to have been able to gather a strong team of professionals. Every one of them was extremely dedicated to helping her. We all tried our best to learn exactly what to do and did have some success at refeeding. However, ultimately, the anorexia continued to progress despite all of our hard work. During our time at BC Children's, we were taught how to do meal planning, meal support, and coaching strategies. We learned that these skills are extremely specific, complex, and intensive, and they require significant training and practice. Caregivers need to be steps ahead at all times, and with feeding 6 times per day, it is literally a full-time job. When Riley was released from the hospital, staff told us that even though Riley was refed, this next period would likely be the hardest part. We needed to emulate the specialized eating disorders program, but without lockdown security, highly trained professionals, and the support of the peer group who were in the unit with her. We understood that while Riley's weight was now in normal range, her brain would take months or years to slowly pull away from Ed's control. She continued to struggle with depression and suicidal ideation. Although it was literally and painfully, especially for Riley, 1 step forward, 2 steps back at times, over several months we made progress. And Riley fought Ed every minute of every day while returning to school, attending frequent appointments, and trying to navigate her way back to the life of a teenager. We were able to get through that period successfully because we had the knowledge and skills to physically implement an evidence-based program that works. We also had the support of the Specialized Eating Disorders Outpatient Program in Kelowna, where Riley had regular access to a psychiatrist and a clinician and dietitian who specialize in eating disorder treatment. We were able to join support groups for parents and attend informational workshops on eating disorders. Specialized knowledge and care are absolutely integral in eating disorder treatment. There are so many caring professionals in our communities who want and need this knowledge in order to help their patients to receive treatment in their hometown areas. Today's workshop is a groundbreaking step in making this happen. Another challenge was taking a very reluctant child to frequent separate appointments. A hope for the future would be a family-centered team model with professionals using the same language, giving the same messages, and making a collaborative plan for treatment. When your child develops an eating disorder, your family's life as you knew it is very quickly turned upside down. We often refer to it as hijacked. Ed hijacks every single aspect of your world. Parents are absolutely terrified as they watch their child suddenly become someone they don't recognize. And I don't mean physically. We did not have a good understanding of what the disorder was doing to Riley's brain. The eating problems were one thing, but why was our little girl having fits of rage, crying hysterically, and talking about suicide? We had a lot to learn, and our team tried to help us through our fear, guilt, and at times denial. Parents need lots of support early on in order to understand the disorder and what it's doing to their child. Learning to separate the disorder from Riley was one of the best ways in which we could understand what was happening. Once, after Riley had blown up at me, something she never would have done previously, we went for a walk, and during a rare moment of clarity, she said, "Mom, Ed hates you the most because you're threatening to take his power away." That was one of the most helpful things for me in understanding what Ed was doing to her. Most parents need help to navigate the system. They are too overwhelmed to do research and planning when their world is crumbling around them. They need to know that although they will feel like the disorder must be all their fault, it is not. This belief was prevalent for a long time, but now we know that eating disorders are genetically based and triggered by a myriad of factors. In fact, if family dynamics, relationships, or parenting style contributes, then that piece can be addressed with help from the professional team. But please help parents know that they did not do this to their child. So much energy is lost to guilt and shame, when in truth, every single ounce of your energy is needed to support your child through recovery. I said earlier that I believe eating disorders are the most misunderstood mental illness. When it happens, you find that most people in the world believe that eating disorders are a choice to lose weight or to gain attention. They are based on vanity or poor decision making. Because the behaviors of restricting food, purging, or overexercising reflect a choice, early on it was very difficult for us to get our heads around the fact that this disorder made Riley incapable of making any other choice. It's so difficult for us to comprehend the terror that people with eating disorders constantly face. We need to help our friends, family, and communities to understand that eating disorders are not a choice, because we need them to help us, and they want to help us. The stigma around mental illness is way bigger than eating disorders, as everyone in this room knows. And it makes it all the more difficult for families to reach out for help when we know that the stigma is there. Having a child with any serious illness is unbelievably difficult. But imagine feeling shameful about it and like you have to keep it a secret at the same time. Last March, when Riley decided to speak out to her grad class and entire school about her experience, Mark, Sydney, and I were overwhelmed with pride. We understood that the reason she did it is to demonstrate to others that eating disorders and other mental illnesses do not discriminate. It can happen to anyone at any time. Her message was that if we can help others to understand this, people will not have to feel shameful for suffering in these ways. Communities can openly provide the support needed and rally for families facing mental illness in the same ways we do for other illnesses. Our society is moving forward in this regard, and it feels tremendously hopeful. This day that Jennifer and her team and BC Children's Hospital have created is an example of this progress, and it means so much to us to be a part of such a special day here in our hometown.
Because my brain was so diminished from starvation, I often feel as though parts of the past 3 years are missing from my memory. However, by sharing my story and using my experience to make positive change, I have made some sense of my journey with anorexia nervosa. As a result, I have compiled a few key points which I offer to those struggling or those working to offer help. First, it's no one's fault. Far too often, mental illnesses, and especially eating disorders, are perceived as something the victim can control. It is beneficial in recovery from an eating disorder to realize immediately that it is not the fault of the child or the parents. It just happens, unfortunately, just as physical illness does. This fact needs to be made clear to parents as soon as diagnosis takes place, in order to avoid the guilt and shame which so often plague families with a mentally ill child. Second, at a time when my rational thought was lost to Ed, I thought I needed to keep total control. At this point, parents need to take over because the child is incapable of performing any form of self-care, despite how much they may convince you that they can. This is difficult because Ed is tricky and he will put on a good show in order to convince parents and healthcare workers that everything is fine. Thinking back, I know that earlier admission into hospital would have been the most beneficial. However, at the time, I adamantly refused to go anywhere near inpatient. In order to take control, parents need to have a good understanding of eating disorders and a support system to educate and help provide care. Lastly, I believe that positive incentive to recover is the most successful way to avoid relapse. This comes from both the parents and the team in the form of encouragement during the highs and empathy during the lows. Slowly adjusting into a lifestyle which offers fulfillment without having to do with exercise or food is important. For some, it may be following the path I took and healing through sharing. For others, it may be moving on completely and learning to live and cope without Ed. The thoughts will always be there in some form, but they are highly manageable with practice. I am not fully recovered. Physically, I am finally healthy. Mentally, I am capable of managing stress in healthy ways, although I continue to experience Ed thoughts and depressive tendencies. Until just recently, I attended bi-monthly appointments with my Kelowna team and now have physical monitoring by a family doctor and appointments with a counselor. Having the ability to help others is my incentive to continue to fight Ed. and I will do so until he no longer has a place in my mind. It is my greatest wish that all sufferers of eating disorders receive the care that I did in order to recover and live fulfilling lives. And it is incentives like today which make this possible. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having us. Thank you.